It's hard. It's Hey everyone. So we're going to lull into getting started. I hope you enjoyed our dope lo-fi hip-hop music. It is very helpful for all occasions. So guys, thank you so much. And I apologize for not having your seats set out. I honestly did not think this many people would come. It is Monday, so I'm sure you're a little bit tired, but hopefully we'll have spirited conversation around some utilitarian uses of cryptocurrency in social impact. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce some amazing folks. We have Catherine, who is the head of institutional liquidity at Ripple. We have Adrian Berg from RTI International, who is one of Consensus Social Impact's huge partners and does a lot of work in the government sector. And we have Ryan here from ICO Alert, who basically does research and analysis across a lot of different projects. Can you hear this? It's a phone. The phone? Oh. Good catch. Good catch. I'm going to have to go like this because I got my notes on here.
Feedback from the speaker.
Oh yeah, so we're just not a great alignment here. Before introducing these amazing people, I would like to go into a little bit of the background of the event and also what the heck blockchain for social impact or consensus social impact is. So a show of hands, who has heard of consensus in some way, shape, or form? Okay, we're doing all right. We're doing okay. So if you've heard of consensus, we have a lot of different parts. It's pretty confusing, and it's not at all like a traditional company. And the way that I mean that is we use a spoke and hub model. So we have a lot of different circles and spokes. The spokes are going to be startups like MetaMask, Infura, Truffle, AdChain. About 90 to 95% of the first entities that someone would interact with in the Ethereum blockchain ecosystem would be one of the spokes, one of the startups. The circles are the different services. So this is going to be Consensus Solutions, Token Foundry, Consensus Ventures, and the most recently Consensus Social Impact. So for us, we just focus on directly social impact projects. We tend to work with foundations, governments, and other entities, so CSR, corporate social responsibility entities of organizations, and we do this all around the world. Most recently focusing on identity and on self-sovereign finance. So I invite all of you all throughout this conversation, and this is the same with the beautiful people that we have here. Reach out. We come here to collaborate, and I'm sure the same is well for our partners here. So to start, Catherine, could you tell us a little about yourself and about Ripple?
Sure. Hi guys, Catherine Coley here. I actually go by my last name, Coley, oddly enough. But I guess that kind of connects to where I came from and how I got to Ripple. So I started out, some would say social impact, how do you address it in the world? And my thought was to move to Hong Kong to start my career. So I began on the FX trading floor at Morgan Stanley in Hong Kong, what seems to be a mini crypto job years ago, and really built out the focus of bringing US clients out to Asia and kind of expanding and crossing the borders, really understanding how institutions do it. From there, I went to London to work with Morgan Stanley again, and continued kind of my love affair with the cross-border environment, as well as the inefficiencies that exist in the markets. When I came to then realize there was a better way through crypto, and I needed to repatriate a lot of my money back into the US, I really dug into crypto, learning all about the various ones out there at that time, which were about 3. And so looking into XRP really kind of brought to me some of the technology that I didn't know existed. And it wasn't yet ready there. So I said, what's better to make it ready than go work for them? And so I joined about a year ago. Maybe my mic's off. I joined about a year ago and have been really focused on building out the institutional aspects of XRP, focused on the liquidity, the custodians, the exchanges, as well as market makers and market takers. So that's kind of what I'm doing as part of the team. But Ripple itself really focuses on software solutions for increasing the efficiency of global payments. So you think about the vision of where payments take place, banks. So we have a product called xCurrent for banks and financial institutions, and that's for processing payments more efficiently. Then we also have one for the clients of banks, so that's xVia, helping them send global payments better. And then the third one is xRapid, and xRapid actually uses XRP as a means of moving fiat currency through XRP to fiat currency, increasing the efficiency from 2 to 5 days of settlement to 2 minutes. So you can think of dollars into Mexican peso is what the current pilots are doing, and that's really focused on remittance corridors and building out a much more efficient way to move money across borders. So that's about it.
Awesome. I'm going to just say without the mic. My name is Adrian Berg. I work for RTI. RTI is a not-for-profit research institute based in North Carolina. We do about 75% of our work for the federal government. Most of that is in the healthcare and international development spaces. So that would be CDC, NIH, USAID. We do a lot of their big international development projects, for example, on malaria, a lot of stuff on Zika. We do, for example, now in the opioid epidemic, a lot of the big statistics that you see, those are all collected by RTI staff. So we specialize in high quality research, and we work very closely with a lot of different entities from the government that are thinking about, how do we leverage technology to solve critical problems. And for us, typically you think about government lags behind industry by anywhere from 10 to 15 years. And there's even further delay where you have kind of these organizations that are responding to RFPs that are issued. And so there ends up being kind of more and more delay. And there's really not a lot of thought as to how can we optimize this process of technology transfer. How do we use things like AI and blockchain to improve impact, improve efficiency, and better serve the communities that we work with. And so RTI headed up a group called Lab 58, which is meant to think a little bit more about this. And I joined based on my background. I've worked in Bangladesh, India, Afghanistan, a lot of different countries around the world, more in the field, and came back with kind of the eye to just really understand what these technologies do, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and how can we communicate that with these organizations that are a little bit more kind of traditional in their mindset. We speak our own kind of language. It's very bureaucratic. It's often very slow. And in order to communicate that, we kind of need a bridge to kind of be the go-between between the two parties. And really that's what we're trying to do. We've been doing some advising for the federal government and helping them think about how to adopt this as well as how to regulate it. So as you all know, cryptocurrencies are a very hot space. The government is thinking about what to do here. There's a lot of questions, a lot of things that are up in the air, and hopefully we'll know over the next year or two what the regulatory landscape will really look like.
Hey guys, I'm Ryan Jennis. I work at ICO Alert, based in Pittsburgh. We started a year ago. We are the most comprehensive list of ICOs, and all ICOs are legitimate, so you can guarantee that. Just kidding. We are actually the most comprehensive list of ICOs on the internet. So we're not just every other listing site. We're actually the #1 lister, I say in my mind, because we've listed about 1,800 ICOs last year. If you guys aren't familiar with ICOs, it's initial coin offerings. It's pretty much the best way for a company to turn their company into a coin and then raise capital through an initial coin offering period, much like an initial public offering. So our second most numerous listing on the internet would be about 500 listings. By the end of the year, we'll have about 5,000 listings. So from that perspective, we're much more a data site, and we see ourselves as a flag bearer for the entire world of ICOs and initial coin offerings. So what our site does is we actually investigate and look deeper into all the ICOs that we list, and to make sure that they're all legitimate, we actually do full course interviews with the CEOs and heads of those companies to make sure that you guys can see and do your own research. And we do 2,000 word reports so you guys can do your own research as to whether an ICO is legitimate or not. On the social impact side, we're actually working with the Blockchain Social Impact Coalition in order to use their platform to validate all the ICOs that are doing philanthropic work, as well as donation-based ICOs, because there's a lot of blockchain companies out there, a lot of initiatives, and I think blockchain in general splits people up into two kinds of worlds. You're either there to make money and to invest and to kind of empower yourself, or you see the larger power of the technology underneath in order to empower individuals and grow your community. So I see it as my personal game to be associated with these individuals and work towards social impact across the world. I would say the ICO world is definitely very, it's very controversial, because you got some companies that you can't validate where your money's going. So the next level is, where are companies going post-ICO? What are they going to be doing with the money? What are they going to do for the community surrounding them? So I'm going to be talking about it a little bit later, but using social impact as a way to view initial coin offerings can tell you, if the company says they want to raise money to donate money to different organizations, you want to see where that's going. If they're a blockchain company, then you should expect more. So at ICO Alert, we're definitely really focused on doing work for the entire industry. Me personally, I actually work with disadvantaged youth, and I've been working for the National Society of Black Engineers, the National Action Council for Minorities in Engineering, and done some work with Habitat for Humanity in order to kind of illuminate how regular companies, traditional companies work, so that I can better advise ICOs and other blockchain initiatives to empower the world at large better as well. So thank you for having me.
Nice. And guys, we're going to be, one, I guess they turn the mics off so everyone speak very loudly. In fact, if you'd like, you can pass them down so that you don't have something to hide your nervousness. We're going to try to get you all involved as much as possible, right? I don't want this to be kind of the normal, like, y'all come here for 2 hours and you watch a whole bunch of people that you may have not known before talk, and then we all leave tired that it's a Monday. So certainly want to get you involved. So I'm actually going to start some of these questions off by asking anyone courageous enough to answer, and then go to the panel and kind of mix it up that way. Are you all cool with that? Yeah? Everyone's like, yeah, God. So the first question that we have is how you would define what a cryptocurrency is. Does anyone want to attend to that or take a throw at it? And it doesn't have to be like a Webster-like definition, guys. It can be pretty low-key.
It's a currency that exists on a blockchain.
A currency that exists on a blockchain? That's actually not a bad definition at all. Catherine?
I'm going to have to...
cool.
Oh, it's fine. I'm going to have to differ just a little bit, because some out there don't necessarily have blocks or chains. And I would say a currency that uses cryptographic math to be found. Or sound as well.
Adrian?
I like that technical definition. Sounded good. Very good. Yeah, I'll second that.
I'd say it's an encrypted asset. How about that?
I would extend off of Catherine's definition, but adding that it cannot be doubly spent.
Right.
It cannot
I mean,
be
that's one of the main reasons of cryptocurrencies or of cryptography to resolve that double spend issue.
And yeah.
Do you consider it a currency or a digital asset? Because I find that the nomenclature is not settled.
The challenge is that it's such a broad
Yeah.
range of technologies that assigning a true definition to it is really difficult.
And that's actually, and you're right on the money, because that's where I wanted to transition. A lot of the times when we see the conversation, it is defined or is kind of referred to as a cryptocurrency, but there are a lot of digital assets. And even the word currency in cryptocurrency kind of infers some type of legal tender. It may not be legal here, but in some ways. So what are y'all's thoughts on that in terms of the differentiation of digital assets when you start to get into utility tokens, obviously security tokens, which a lot in the United States right now, most cryptos are regarded as securities, particularly if you're coming out now. For those who came out before, a lot of the regulations started to set forth by the SEC. There's a lot of gray area. So like stablecoins like MakerDAO, aren't really considered a security. I believe XRP is kind of in that same bucket, in which it kind of pre-existed a lot of the legalese that are starting to come out. So what are y'all's thoughts? And Ryan, I'll start from the back.
Yeah, I would definitely say that cryptocurrencies, if you can find a system where you can actually figure out how to name what each one is, you'd be the richest person in the world. Because
the government also wants to hire you.
Yeah, exactly. Because is it an asset? If you think it's an asset, then you can make an argument that it's a currency. You can make an argument that it's a piece of property. Because of the technological capabilities of it, you could just say that it's a bunch of digits or it's just data. So I've seen companies describe it so many different ways that it's really, really difficult to encapsulate it in one thing. What I would say is do your research into what each cryptocurrency is, and make sure you not only look at the white paper, but if you can find a YouTube video or see somebody talking about it, find out the real utility behind it. What's the point of it? What's the use of it? Because the real use of that token or that coin or that piece of property, that tells you what it is. Because even a piece of property, what can you do with it? Well, you can live on it, but you can also grow crops on it and actually make money out of it. So you could say that that's a security because it may grow in value over time, and maybe you could promise that. So it's really difficult, and it's a nebulous question, and that's why we're all here, to try to wrap our heads around it.
My answer is very much easier than that. I just stopped using the word cryptocurrency initially because crypto had such a hangover. And so people saw cryptocurrency and immediately thought that what I was doing was defiling the system or was anti what my original goal was, which is just to make money move faster. And so I use digital assets just to alleviate some of the skepticism that comes into that conversation. That's it.
Adrian, what about you?
I'd say watch for this to be one of the most important areas of the next, 6 months to a year, where really hammering down the definition of what each one is. That's how you really create legislation around it, is first defining it and then defining what the regulations are for that. So it's incredibly important that we do eventually come to a definition that makes sense, whether that's someone in the back office creating a definition based on what they think. That often can be very disconnected from what the community may feel is appropriate. But that's really what we need now, is more education for these regulators to be able to speak the language and classify them correctly. Right? As you guys are saying, some of them may be used for multiple things. Well, maybe we need definitions that can be more flexible and that can better kind of cover the full range of uses and abilities of these tokens.
And this is something that I've struggled with because one of my main roles at Consensus is a crypto economist, right? In the social impact lens, particularly looking at how can we abstract models that particularly focus on social impact. So a perfect example is looking at non-fungibles in social services. Housing vouchers, right? Food stamps or supplemental nutrition assistance program. These are assets, right, that have some type of value attached to it, pay for some type of thing, but aren't the same from person to person to district, and have liquidity in that, right? But you wouldn't necessarily put that in the same lens as a cryptocurrency, right? You shouldn't really be able to spend a housing voucher or a tokenized housing voucher to buy some Gatorade, right? You want to make sure that it has the mapped purpose that it was made for, which gets me, at least personally, I start to refer to all these just as tokens. Now, attending to the point that you made, Adrian, in terms of definitions, I've seen something really interesting happen over the past year going to 2018. So 2017, we were seeing hella ICO just all over the place. It was a great time to do it then because you really couldn't do it after that. And then entering 2018, we start to see a lot of private sales. And then we don't really see too many sales at all, or the Reg D compliant. They're really just offered to accredited investors. So private, and you have to be an accredited investor. But what I've also seen at the same time is people make flexible the definition of what utility is. So they'll try to work in utility into their DAC, right? A perfect example, and one that all of you all should definitely look out for is, oh, I'm going to have this dApp. In order to use the dApp, you got to have this token. It's a membership token, right? But why? Like, why? There's no utility in just gaining membership via a token, right? Now, if that's used for voting access, or you have to stake it in some way, right, as a security method. Ether is a perfect example. They switch cryptocurrency into cash, right? So in order to put up a sell point, you have to stake a certain amount of Ether, which does have monetary considerations so that you don't steal someone else's money when you meet them in person, right, to make that exchange. Or token curated registries, right, where the incentive has to be detached from something as volatile as an Ether or a Bitcoin, because it has to be an incentive only for that system. And token curated registries is just a list curated, and the curators, the better the list they make, in theory, the higher the cost of that token would go, right? So these are all really good use cases of what utility is, but that term can be bastardized in a lot of ways. And I always think, and I guess Adrian, this is a question for you, I do definitely agree that in making these solid definitions, you get closer to more reasonable legislature. But at the same time, I'm afraid that if they're too strict, certain countries like the US start to lose out on the economic utility and benefit that can be experienced later on.
I think that's something that we see a lot now, is trying to be smarter about regulation. Right? There's increasingly pressure on growth. We look at GDP growth, right? We're always kind of trying to push the pace and make sure that we don't stifle innovation. And I mean, that's one thing that the current administration is really trying to do, is to make sure that we maybe prioritize, let's experiment more, and then we'll regulate kind of based on that more as we go, rather than, let's say, a China who just kind of blanket says, let's put pause on this, and we'll learn from others, then we'll decide what the regulations will be. But when it comes to, I think, the use of cryptocurrencies, I think the other major factor in this that will dictate a lot of the legislation is, what is the use to the end user? So the beneficiaries that you're working with, what is their perspective on it? What are they actually using it for? And what value does it confer to them? Is this something that adds a great deal of value to their life? Is this something that has maybe personal data on it? If it does, then it's going to be regulated much more tightly. It's something that becomes something akin to critical infrastructure, right? Where you do not want this to fail, you do not want it to go wrong, and you think about kind of all the different uncertainties within crypto economics. There's a lot of fundamental questions that have yet to be answered. And in this case, because there's so much risk, they want to proceed very slowly. And so you'll see kind of an asymmetry where in certain spaces they'll be kind of fast and loose with regulation, and others where they'll be much more hesitant and much more conservative.
I'd like to follow up, this kind of reminds me of when the government was trying to figure out what's pornography and what's not, because the answer, the conclusion was, I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it. And so it kind of takes us back to when we're vetting different companies to be listed on our site. Because we're free to list, we actually have the autonomy to say, no, we don't want to take you, because anything that's an obvious scam or an obvious scheme or not safe for work or a parody, we don't want to list it, right? So we kind of look at things, but it's a philosophical question. I mean, what is money? What is this currency? It's the unit of value of measure, or what value is itself. So how do you measure value to one person versus another? So we have these conversations about, can I curse? Is that okay? So, what's a shit coin, right? I don't know if you guys have ever heard that, but you can make a lot of money off of a shit coin. So, but that doesn't mean that it has value, but maybe it did to you because you traded it in 2017 and made a bunch of cash. So it's a philosophical question of how do we say it's meaningful to one person versus another? Because if I want to trade a coin that's meaningless to everybody, but it has value for me, then one person kind of putting it into a different conversation saying it's useless here, that doesn't mean anything. Because then you can say, well, baseball cards are meaningless. They shouldn't be traded for money or anything else.
So this next question I want to put out back to the audience. So how do you see cryptocurrencies being used in social impact? From any of those who have either are hodlers right now, maybe a bit adept. Yeah.
I have a few for remittances, what XRP is doing, for financial inclusion, for new monetization models, for people on social platforms that are contributing to those platforms to monetize on their contribution. Yeah, those are like the main. And then utility tokens for incentivizing people to share their data. A lot of platforms now don't have the incentive to share their data, and they actually have more incentive to hold it to themselves and make money off of it. And for economic resources, the sharing of data in any stratosphere would be beneficial to society.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
If you think about the blockchain, this is basically decentralized trust. What it does is it creates some sort of disintermediation between people to be able to interact with each other. Going back to the subject just before, I understand the regulation needed, and this is how the world has been in the last, century. But if you look at the ICO side of it, if you put $10 in ICO in 2013, you can make maybe $1,000 or $2,000, and you're not going to lose your money if you put $10. So the problem with the way the system has been set up is that accredited investors are the only ones that can actually make money off opportunities that don't exist for anybody else. So you have to be very careful in the way you consider regulation and what it means value for somebody. I think you have to protect grandpa and grandma at the end of the day for sure. But you also have to give leeway to people to be able to put, 10, $20, $50 without losing their house, in behind it. And this is why the system is not allowing today. So going back to social impact, disintermediation means that people who don't have the ability to connect with, certain ecosystem or protocol, just because they don't have the wealth to do it, or just because, the situation, here you basically have the ability to just connect to that and be able to transact value, which is whether an asset or a currency, on an amount that is, to your comfortable level, but still be able to participate. Which today, with banking, third party, and all the limitation that you have, you cannot do. And this is what the future is about. This is you, me, being able to interact on something even though we don't know each other.
Absolutely, and before I pass it off to the panel, one thing that we've noticed is that dApps in general, and really the blockchain ecosystem in general, has a terrible UX, terrible user experience. I mean, just awful. And as easy as Ethereum is, to build on, and hopefully that'll get easier, and hopefully things will become more scalable, and other blockchains as well, right? The difficulty of kind of pairing or paralleling what we're used to in an application to what's now required to be part of this decentralized, more peer-to-peer economy is ridiculous. When it comes to cryptocurrencies in particular, it's a buy-in system. So just like you were alluding to, you right now, unless you're using a U-port, you can't use any Ethereum dApp without holding Ether on mainnet. Like you can't do it. And the implications that this has for people who live on less than $1 a day is they essentially can't be a part of that economy. Before I get to you, I'll put a flag on it. I did want to see Catherine, starting with you. I mean, what are your thoughts on this? How do you think, or how is Ripple going about it? How do you think about it personally?
Yeah.
Can I add one more thing for you to cover? If you can cover vested interests in the banking industry, can you throw that in there?
Maybe. Just solving it. So one of the things that I think you really touched on was a technology that was really integral to the main parts of Ripple, called Interledger. So Interledger, or ILP, is what we call is the kind of the underbelly protocol layer that will allow for just value to be interoperable. So that's what Xcurrent and Xvia are built on, with the acknowledgement that banks today are still using fiat currencies, but we don't want them to have to throw out this new technology and input a new one when they're ready to adopt digital assets. So with Interledger, that technology really can allow for different ledgers to connect, be it Bitcoin, be it XRP, be it dollars, be it property in some aspects. And the Gates Foundation has actually worked really closely with our Interledger engineers for Mahaloop, and that was to bank the unbanked. So I think that there's actually progress taken in the steps of using blockchain for good. And in that aspect, they're realizing that we can't have one protocol for all, but we need to have one way of communicating across multiple ledgers. So that's one aspect that Ripple's really focused on. The other aspect is much like what you said. Being able to reduce the friction in remittances could be huge. We started our pilot for XRapid actually on the day of the 7.2 earthquake in Mexico, and we were able to settle dollars into Mexican peso in that day in under 2 minutes. So you just think of the impact of that on a larger scale and where that can really bring quite a huge social value from the remittance corridors that are out there. So that's kind of one aspect that I really like to focus on.
And then redirecting kind of a follow-up from that, and you kind of mentioned it in your answer, how do you think the usage of cryptocurrencies, tokens, are going to differ between westernized economies and emerging economies? And Ryan, we can start with you. It's a curveball.
I'm not good at baseball. I would say that in emerging economies, you have problems like you don't have access to the internet. The reason we're all here talking about cryptocurrencies is because we know about the internet. I mean, this was the website showed you where to go and look at this. And it showed you how to invest in cryptocurrency and do your own research. There's about 1.5 to 2 billion people in the world who don't have access to the internet every day. So there's actually one cryptocurrency that I see I look at tons, but there's one called BankU that is actually creating a blockchain that can work on any smartphone, no matter how horrible the technological capacity of it is. So they can actually have small businesses in their communities and track tokens and things of that nature.
It actually works on any mobile.
Yeah, that's it.
The key manufacturer.
I'm validated. So there are people who are building cryptocurrencies that are going to help the world and care about using blockchain for people who don't have access to this. If you want to invest in an ICO, you maybe need $100, maybe $50, something like that. If you wanted to invest in Apple, Google, or Yahoo, you need, what, $200,000 a year? $1 million liquid? I mean, these large companies, you can't even invest into in order to become your own venture capitalist. And initial coin offerings and cryptocurrencies the point of them is to bring down the barrier of entry. I mean, the point of the Bitcoin white paper is to allow people to see what's being double spent, to your definition of crypto. So to me, at the very heart of cryptocurrency is seeing that no matter where you are in the world, it's important to use it for social impact. Yeah, you can make your money, but I think that the problem with the way we look at investments is all the marketing is being put into investing into ICOs or investing to get a return, to make cash. But the Eastern countries, they're not really interested in making money, but the social good and what they can use it for. That's why in South Korea, that probably runs cryptocurrency, if you guys don't know, they're all about gaming. And so the utility of their cryptocurrency, a lot of it is to allow people to participate in tournaments, because that's a huge part of their culture. So to me, the cultural aspect is what you need to look at, because that's where adoption really comes from. People don't use Snapchat because they were told to. It's because the culture of this new generation wanted to use it. So it's going to be important that there's a meaning behind it.
And Adrian, to follow, if you have any.
Yeah. So one of the big areas that I've been thinking a lot about is vested interests. And you think about the decision-making paradigms of a lot of these other countries. It's very different when you look at, let's compare Somalia to the U.S. Right? What do they want out of a currency? The U.S. wants stability. Somalia wants something that functions. And those tend to be very different needs. They prioritize very different aspects of a cryptocurrency. And thus, we may see very different looking cryptocurrencies depending on the context that you go to. The banks are loath to let go of the stranglehold that they have. We talk about remittances. Banks make a killing on fees. That's kind of the basic structure of how a lot of them operate. Loosening and regulating monetary policy is obviously a big part of governmental function, and so the ability to play that role in the cryptocurrency environment will dictate whether or not they're on board. If for example China feels threatened at the national level by a cryptocurrency, of course they're going to stomp it out. And it depends. In a democracy, they may not be able to do that, but in an autocracy, they may be able to do so. So again, it will definitely look a lot different depending on what country you end up in. And I would tend to err away from the side of the universal cryptocurrency. I have a hard time seeing it, but some people are still for it.
And I'm very much of that same opinion. And from what I've seen is that, again, there are some huge cultural considerations in terms of how the West operates economically in different Eastern countries. And I don't mean to make it as binary as that, because it isn't. But I think that's where you start to see the initial differences. One thing that I do see, and this helps break down some of these barrier to entry issues that we have, is the use of stable coins and stable tokens. And that I don't think we're going to see any mainstream adoption of a DApps token, even if it is a proven utility token, because of the disassociation of its value from what we're used to, right? Which is integers. And this is the same reason why I don't think Bitcoin will ever be used for what it was meant for. I think Bitcoin will probably, and it's already kind of done this, and Bitcoin futures exist now, it's probably going to be a digital asset to be traded, right, on Wall Street, because one, the transaction costs are way too high, so the buy-in that you would need is at least $20, right, to overcome the transaction cost of moving that $20. And the second is because there's a huge cultural dissonance to just Bitcoin. And I'm sure everyone has heard, if you've been trying to, for me, it was my parents, whom I still don't have, they're not hodlers yet, so I'm a failure. The first thing that they ask you is, oh man, I can't afford one Bitcoin. And it's like, you take algebra, man? You get the decimal points, you don't have to get the whole thing. It's a very common mistake, but that user experience, right, that assumption is very hard to overcome. And particularly when you're using dollars, right? The most that you go is to the 10th place, or 100th place. So I think those issues are going to have huge implications in terms of what's actually adopted, and that stable coins will allow that friction to become a little less obvious.
Yeah, when you kind of connecting that stablecoins to disenfranchised communities. So I don't like Western, Eastern either. It is kind of binary because you look at Latin America. There's actually a cryptocurrency that is actually trying to help small coffee farmers. So when you go to Starbucks and you order the most niche kind of coffee, like the Red Mountain Special, you don't know the quality of that coffee. You don't know. But most of the coffee makers that are around the world are small coffee farmers that get paid about $2 an hour for their coffee beans. And the truth of the matter is they don't know whether or not they're getting paid fairly. They don't. If there was a stable coin that was tied to a US dollar and it was true, they'd be able to see that they're getting paid $2 an hour. But because they don't, they get paid by quantity rather than quality. So there's some dirt and bugs in your coffee you don't know about probably that you're paying extra for. And that's not fair to you or them.
A few things. So on the market cap, if you invest in crypto, you have to look at the market cap, right? Don't look at the price of one unit. If you look at Ripple almost overtook Bitcoin in market cap 2 months back, just because the amount of issued tokens are way higher than what Bitcoin is, and people just say, hey, 25 cents, 25. Yeah, but actually it's almost like the market cap goal of Bitcoin, which doesn't make any sense at the end of the day. That's one thing. Second thing, stablecoin that you mentioned, that's going to be the game changer for cryptocurrency. So this is going to give all that the ability to just interact with the traditional economy. But now the way you have to set up basically the stablecoin is that it has to be decentralized from the US dollar. If you look at Tether, for instance, it's a scammy thing just because you don't actually have legal claim on the US dollar because it's not your deposit, it's somebody else's deposit back in China or whatever. If you look at TrueCoin, then yes, it does work because you actually have your real deposit. The only problem with that is that you have to go through the entire traditional layer of having a deposit in the bank account, it costs you money, it takes some time, whatever. Now you have that, and that is the real deal here because it's subject to the dollar but completely decentralized from the actual traditional economy. You have some sort of mechanism that breaks down the volatility and brings the stable coin back to one. It could be against the dollar, or it can be against the world index of the IMF, and then the US dollar is actually completely outside the equation. What I love about crypto, which is amazing, is that even when Bitcoin China tries to actually ban Bitcoin, it doesn't matter. It keeps going.
And I think before we continue, I want to address, and Catherine, I want to start with you, because we're starting to, over this conversation, right? We're starting to see that there are different economic tranches that these different cryptocurrencies fall into. You have, stable coins, right? You have things like Tether, which Tether, some countries are actually starting to try to implement their own Tether using banks, and it's called tokenized fiat, right? So it's a token based off of like $1, right?
Right, but it has to be your dollars, because if it's not your dollars,
no,
then you don't have to.
No, exactly. And then there's certainly inefficiencies in it, but that doesn't stop the fact that it's still being attempted by different countries, right? It's still coming into the ether, right? So you have stable coins that are decentralized, you have tokenized fiat that could be nationalized, and then you have other tokens that are used for operational efficiencies like XRP, right? In which it's not, at least initially, and correct me if I'm wrong, for consumer use as it is, at least for the products that you all have out, for the efficiency of moving money, right, against a wire transfer. So where do you see these different types of cryptocurrencies coexisting when there's like 10 years from now? Yeah.
That's easy. 10 years ago, I had the same hope and vision that I'm still fighting for today. And so I'm going to say that that's the same vision that I'm going to be fighting for 10 years from now. And that's really for allowing us to have these conversations that are borderless, efficient, and really not keeping people out of the conversation. So, if you think about stablecoins, that's one element, but you're still defining people by their jurisdiction and then putting weight and value into that where it's tethered to. The access for having something that's 24/7 and liquid regardless will allow you to have different transactions and businesses to take place in time zones that were normally tied to US dollar banking hours. So back when I was trading the Pakistan, you could only do it in a small window of time in order to have it settle correctly against US dollar. If you imagine that being able to trade against XRP, then being able to go into the Indian rupee, you can do that on a Saturday. And so that would really open up new lines of business that I think we are not ready for at this moment to imagine. Kind of in the same realm of something that's more divisible than an integer, we're going to be introducing a very different payment style where every time you agree with something I say, ka-ching, ka-ching, 1/100 of a penny goes into the fund of my choosing. Or something like that. Stoplights changing colors based on cars paying premiums for subscriptions. This gets us to get kind of way out of our zone of what we're comfortable with in current business models. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about our conversations, whether it's Ether for creating all sorts of business models that can come out of it and different kind of applications. That's one thing. And for me, I focus on the idea that every interaction we have is some form of an exchange. And if we can do it in the most efficient way, we can think of much larger concepts and ideas and do that rather than waste our time at the bank at 4 p.m. on a Friday.
And Adrian, I want to follow her comments because another dynamic that's being introduced outside of the different purposes, right, of these different cryptocurrencies is what they mean for the economy, right, and how you create regulation around it. So one, and as a preface, one huge difference that cryptos don't really attend to well is the economic growth based on our traditional economy created by loans, right? And you can't loan cryptocurrency, right? The thing is
compound.
If you loan it, right, there has to be a representation of what that loan is. You can't loan it like you do dollars, right? Because the way that we loan dollars is double spending, right? It is creating money that previously did not exist and now exists in two different places. But computationally, and I know Dharma is a good example, right? Dharma has a representation of what you would be loaning, and that could be DAI. It's multi-collateral. But with all these different, crisscrosses of purposes, and going into this, cashless, more cashless and borderless future, how do you think that, economic and monetary governance or legislation has to be completely rewritten? Can we reliably use, a 1930s Securities Act, right? Where they didn't even think that, honestly, that I would be here, right? So, what are your thoughts on that? How do you think we upscale government entities so that type of legislature can create an environment in which a lot of these different solutions can coexist? Or maybe they can't.
I think, unfortunately there's no good answer to that. There's too many unknowns. You think about, cryptocurrencies are fundamentally different than our current economy. The way that money currently moves between both the formal economy and the informal economy, it's the degree of transparency and the degree of immutability and not having to have maybe a central bank, right? That's a drastic departure from what we have today. And so, kind of to the first question of what is it going to look like in 10 years, I have no idea. I could not. I don't know. But what I can tell you is that there are going to be a lot of difficult lessons learned. So an example I'd like to point out is, I don't know if you guys followed the experiments with salary transparency within companies, where they were testing out, should we, let everybody see everybody else's salary? That wasn't always the best idea. They found out that there was a lot of tension. There was a lot of, humans are not perfect. There are a lot of kind of fundamental psychological factors that cause us to have certain behaviors. You look at behavioral economics, right? We are irrational consumers. Why should one thing happen if just based on how we behave? So at the end of the day, I think we should be moving towards regulating kind of this on an experimental level and kind of moving as the landscape moves and try to kind of adapt and adjust to what we learn.
And going to Ryan, I'm gonna pivot that question. So on the focus of government, and obviously given your wide array of research and experience around a lot of these different representations of digital assets, what are your thoughts on government implementations of crypto? And I give Venezuela's Petro, as an example to work off of.
I think the president of Venezuela is watching this. I can't really, to get to Petro, I have to talk about the United States relationship. I'm much more familiar with the SEC and what the CFTC is trying to do. And the future of cryptocurrency trading is going to become securitized. It's what it looks like right now. Securities are, like the Securities Act of 1933, it was to protect investors. If I'm going to give money to a bank or to a mutual fund, how do I know that I'm going to be protected? Because if somebody steals a bunch of money from you after a bad loan, or whatever the case may be, who do you call? You call 911? You go to the police? Who do you ask? So over time, people start going to the police, and then they go to the FBI, and then the United States said, we have to break in and try to fix this. So what's going to happen? Basically, security token offerings are going to happen. People are going to have to go through the United States in order to get into these tokens. And it pains me to say that, because again, if you're an accredited investor, you can get in anytime you want to. But if you're not, then you can't invest. It doesn't help the layman. It doesn't help the regular person. It only helps about 14 million people in the world, I think, right now. So my answer would be, if we look at the way governments are handling it, I think 10 years in the future, my wish and my hope is that you can actually take a bunch of different securitized token offerings that are allowed by the government and turn those into a mutual fund or an index fund or a salad, whatever we call it then, of different securitized offerings so that anybody can invest $20 into it and then trade that openly. I think one of the reasons that governments, even in Venezuela, have been so volatile is when you do let people trade bonanza and crazy, whatever they want, at any price point, well, when the news comes out, everybody sells. If everybody has a little bit of Facebook stock, it's like, oh, Mark Zuckerberg is getting audited by the government and speaking with Congress. Everybody's like, sell, it's dying, Facebook's dying. Well, Facebook's still alive. It's like, what would happen if we were all doing that already? So when I look at a company or a blockchain initiative like Petro, are they trying to get around their trade tariffs? Are they trying to avoid their responsibilities to their investors, both international? It's hard to say, but what it does is set a precedent that a small country can stand on their own theoretically and build capital out of nothing with cryptocurrency. We've never seen that before. That's why the SEC is scared of making a direct action, because it would set a new precedent. Every time a new technology comes out, they have to make a new rule up. They don't want to make new rules. They want to enforce their rules they already have.
It's a really interesting.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think in terms of where this is going to head in the next 10 years, a lot of it depends on what is our perspective of regulation.
Yeah.
What is our goal with this regulation? And I don't think anyone's really talking about what this regulation actually is. We're just saying it needs to be regulated. And especially, personally, I've never thought about Eastern and Western cultures, but regulation is going to look different for sure based on, hearing you guys speak. So I think that's important to keep in mind when we try to, label and really, give this perspective to what is, regulation.
So I think the other point to add to that is the way that we develop legislation, right? So we often vote for people to make decisions on our behalf. So that has consequences in and of itself.
Isn't regulation just code for banking control over an existential threat to their business model? I mean, let's face it. Like you said, if there was a revolution, we didn't need banks with Bitcoin, and anybody could contribute to an ICO. Nobody in the U.S. can contribute to an ICO anymore unless you're an accredited investor. That's just gone. That genie isn't going back in the bottle. The fiat on and off ramps to get to our bank accounts are so policed right now and so connected to the government that we're seeing more and more delisting of privacy funds and things like this. And democracy, being in charge of, we vote for these people who make these regulations, but as we see time and again, the people we vote for are more responsive to the big donors that put them there than any, vote that the population gets them in there to do. So,
a lot of the landscape is going to be dictated by vested interests.
Right. So then, what I'm, I guess to put a question to the panel, then, thank you for indulging, is, can we put this genie back in the bottle? And when we talk about social impact in crypto, does that just really mean, allowing banks to kind of subjugate that and kind of drive that and make the profit margins themselves? I guess I'm wondering, what can we as people do short of a revolution to enforce the use case of crypto? Because regulation just seems like a cover for...
It does, and I get your point, but it's also how many billions of dollars have banks had to pay for fees against regulation that has gone the other way of how they've acted. So there is some line of regulation in place that has kept bad actors out and punished them. So it's not totally one-sided, but I totally see where you're coming from, because they're moving substantially larger amounts of money than you are in a mom-and-pop shop.
And I think, and this is actually something that I've personally struggled with, because I used to be, an Ether, even a Bitcoin, when 2011 maximalist, right? But when you start to look at, and again, this kind of goes against the economic growth factor that cryptocurrency brings versus its transactional value factor, right? Cryptocurrency has a lot of transactional value factor, but the way that the mainstream interacts with cryptocurrency now, it doesn't provide much economic growth. And that is the issue when you're talking about moving from a traditional economy that's more central bank based, right, to a decentralized economy in which you have a lot more of peer-to-peer interaction. You have to replace what is going to be that economic growth factor within that new economy. And I haven't seen that materialize as much. You're starting to see it a little bit with collateralized debt positions, or essentially loans with MakerDAO, right? You see it a little bit with XRP in different ways, right? These are things that have to exist because we have to make a transition from the user experience that we have now to what we want in the future if we expect it to be, quote unquote, more efficient. And that's just how it is. you're absolutely right, and this is what's leading a lot of the tokenized fiat movements abroad, particularly in Southeast Asia, is that there are a lot of banks, ironically, that are making these moves, right? But then you ask yourself, okay, how do we create consensus, right, around another decentralized mechanism for a nation state that's impoverished or that's considered an emerging economy to use, right? Where you actually do need everyone to be communicating the same language of value. And that's just incredibly difficult. I do agree that vested interests certainly do create lobbies in terms of how we access certain cryptocurrencies. And I also have a question, and this could be attended to anyone on the panel, that right now we're on a private sale mode in which you need to be an accredited investor to participate in if you're American. And there are restrictions, and they do watch and whitelist your public address as to movement from your public address to somebody else's, right? Within a year, I think it's a year, if you're Reg D compliant. Mm-hmm. But what really prevents that, right? How can you regulate a secondary market in which you can't, obfuscate, or take away, in any meaningful sense, the money that's being transacted? And before we continue, I do want to attend to you because you've been.
Yeah. What I think is very important before falling down the cryptocurrency side of this is the underlying technology is really the power. What Viant is doing with fish, what BankU is doing with coffee, what Kabi is doing with rice, what Walmart is doing with Hyperledger. Those are the things that are going to be transformative, knowing that if you're looking at societal change, knowing for certain there's not child labor in your shoes, knowing for certain there's not slavery in your fish, knowing for certain that your coffee is free of pesticides is what is going to have a transformative effect both in the first world and in the emerging world, because you're creating economic incentives by creating actual fair trade. And then cryptocurrency is part of that, but not necessarily all.
No, absolutely, and that's a huge. And if you haven't gotten to like the mental level, what's your name? Andrew. The mental level that Andrew's on is absolutely correct that there needs to be a dissonance between cryptocurrency and the underlying technology, blockchain. However, and this is also that I've seen as a crypto economist creating, because I'm a developer at Trade, literally creating these dApps, is that Viant relies on Ethereum, right? Meaning that it has to operate with Ether. And that's the issue, is that some of these things, given how they work, they're intertwined with the cryptocurrency. And that creates a lot of commercial confusion as to, one versus the other, or how much impact one has the other. Because I absolutely agree with you. I wrote on Medium, like a lot of dApps just don't need a token, right? That their value is immutable aspects of blockchain. But I don't want to take away.
You have to add something to that. If you don't have Ether, you don't have consensus. You don't have. So with the blockchain, then it doesn't exist. Then you need Ether. As a guess. And that's kind of where we get into how, at least on the utility token side, if you're going to use Ethereum-based solutions, how do you make it so that user experience, right, when you're funding users' transactions, because users are not going to pay transaction fees because they don't do that with a Facebook or Uber, how do you make that seamless? But going back to our panel, because I do want to get into some of the more contentious questions, which we've already kind of creeped into. How do you think token distribution will affect wealth distribution in the future? And I will start.
Sure. I think it already has. I mean, from a personal standpoint, the accredited investor aspect of it, I was able to purchase coins with the funds that I had, and it was like exciting and revolutionary that I could put my thought and my money behind projects I believed in, with having as minimal barrier to entry as 4 minutes to take a picture of myself, do the KYC for the exchanges, get the onboarding, that experience. That was really the only barrier to entry earlier on. And I really think that allowed for, especially women, I speak to myself and I speak to my community, that I like to empower, and that's invest and learn to use your funds for your own benefit to empower what your balance sheet is. And a lot of us stay on the sidelines due to fear or obstacles, and the barrier to entry is so low in crypto. I mean, you think about who is on this panel. Where did you start off? Were you in government, or you were?
I was an epidemiologist.
Epidemiologist, FX.
I started Goldman.
Oh, okay. But, well, ignore us. There's only one of us on a panel. You know, the entry points for crypto can be so diverse, and I think that's something that's fascinating. I mean, we have an awesome design team. And I remember one of our designers who, you know, has been influential in the website came up to me and she's like, I really got to understand a little bit more about liquidity because it just doesn't come naturally to me, but can you help me out? And I'm like, you have made it in the door of a huge company in this space, and you have all the access at your fingertips to take your own career and your own funds into your hands. So I think the wealth distribution is wonderful in the sense that we're creating jobs that can be multi-purpose, multi-use, and maybe have a sole initiative. But we also have just a different access to talking about value. You have kind of a lower barrier to entry to have a discussion over prices and cost and money. And that's a taboo subject we've never really talked about until recently. And so I think that's something we're going to see with regulation, the fact that more people are talking about money today than they ever were before. It's coming to the conversation rooms, it's coming to the elevators. The mani-pedi places are all talking about ICOs. I mean, it is raising the conversation level, and I think that's something that's really crucial to addressing then the wealth disparity.
I think what she's saying is super duper huge, and I would double all of that. Like everybody in this room who's talking about cryptocurrency or interested in social impact, you're the future of crypto, because if you let the same people who are in it now, basically most of the industry is still a lot of people who were in it early on, like maybe 2011 would be considered early even, or 2008, and a bunch of newcomers, people who joined Ripple a year ago. I've only been an ICO alert for 6 months. The company's only been around for a year. The time is now, so talk to your friends about it. If you have a friend who's looking for a job and they don't know what to do next, tell them whatever they're doing, tell them to get a job at Piggly Wiggly Scrubbing 4 and study blockchain on the nights and weekends that they have free time, because the industry is ripe for disruption. There's not an Apple, Google, Yahoo, whatever in crypto yet. I mean, the biggest company in crypto, it's probably either Ethereum or Bitcoin or Ripple. And the truth of the matter is that there's a lot of use cases for other companies to come in and help out. There's still a lot that needs to be done. And you see how we don't have every company that's doing everything we need to be done. So we look at the people who are in the industry. We need more women. We need more people of color. We need the LGBTQIA community to come into crypto and to disrupt it for different people, for people from different countries, or else it's going to be just a copy of the VCs and the hedge funds we have already. You can see the money from those companies coming into crypto, and they're going to support their initiatives and their interests. So the time is now for you to use the technology to disrupt whatever you want to happen next. So with wealth.
I would also argue, like you mentioned before, someone within your company came and was like, "Hey, can you give me advice on liquidity?" It's on us to mentor and teach other people about this subject, because I come from a very technical background, and took me reading the white paper 8 times, and I still go back and I read the white paper because I still forget stuff. And it takes finding people who you do want to think are aware and conscious, and mentor them into the space, because even though all of this stuff is out there, someone coming in the space, they don't know what's good is good, right? Truth is very vulnerable right now. So
this is where we're in a really dangerous position, where right now we have an asymmetry between, you look at a mom and pop investor, some person buys Bitcoin for the first time, they're up against these crypto trading desks at the big hedge funds. Who's going to win? The people with the powerful AI models that have spent $100 million developing it, yeah, they're going to torch you. So I would urge a lot of caution.
I think one thing, and I know, and typically, and guys, feel free to definitely, we're gonna have more of these events in the future. And I like to sometimes silo the conversation, because I know, that there definitely should be conversations around blockchain and technology, and also cryptocurrency. This one particularly, I wanted to focus on cryptocurrency because there's a lot of utility being missed, and something that I'm glad that we talked about. But in terms of the distribution of wealth, I mean, we have a lot of big things happening, right? For Ethereum in particular, we're making a transition from proof of work to Casper, which is proof of work and proof of stake. Proof of stake by nature is a wealth-based system. I mean, how much you have is what you're staking, right, in terms of making that network work. And we've already seen this with some neo-colonialism attempts at Puerto Rico. Having had my team there not too long ago, there's a lot more being said than actually being done. And then, you have, whales, right, who can, because the market cap of a lot of these, cryptos to us is huge, but to the traditional economy is nothing, right, where you make $1 million, $2 million transaction and that changes the variance by 5%, right? So that can change the price of a crypto because of that one transaction by a huge amount. Something that you would need hundreds of billions of dollars to do in a traditional economy, I think is really problematic. And that leads me to one of my last questions, at least scripted questions, is do you think initial token issuers, right, so the people who are facilitating, and since the context of this conversation has been ICOs, we'll stick with ICOs. Do you think initial token issuers have innate conflict of interest given secondary market speculation?
Yes. Yeah, because if you're starting an ICO because even if it's the best idea in the world and you want it to be, every single coin to be worth a lot of money, if your end goal is to get it on an exchange so you can make a bunch of bread, then screw you. Because that's not a utility. That's for you to make money. So if you started a company to make money, I guess that's the point of a business. But to me, the point of blockchain is to actually provide a new use and to change things. And that's why we're talking about social impact. So to me, I think in early 2000s is the last time we saw big businesses change. When Starbucks issued their first corporate social responsibility paper, I think, and that was that was huge because no company of that size gave a damn about corporate social responsibility. And a lot of people said, oh, Starbucks, you're faking it. Nobody cares. You don't care about that. You don't care about us. You just want to make money. But the truth is they pressured all these other companies to speak on what they're going to do. So maybe Starbucks wasn't perfect then, but they set a precedent for them to measure themselves against the future of their business. So now they do have more fair trade processes in place in their supply chain. You can see it. And now there's blockchains that copy what Starbucks does and try to improve it. So the question now is, when is an ICO going to start to have their own corporate responsibility statement? What are you going to do with this token after? What's going to happen post-ICO? And that's the point of me talking to these ICO CEOs and leaders when I investigate their services. I want to know what the hell their plan is. And you can make your own decision, but having a token just to have it is worthless. You want to be able to do some of the things like Ripple is doing to broaden the use of this token. The US dollar can be used for a lot, and a lot of bad things too. But what does the white paper on the US dollar look like? They're not going to tell you what to do with the US dollar, and it would look messed up. So to me, the real question is, when are we going to see that an ICO is going to allocate 2% of their tokens to giving back to the local community where they're based? For me, it would be Pittsburgh, right? Pittsburgh needs a lot of help. There's a lot of inner city kids that don't have any access to anything. They don't even know how to play chess. And I was somebody who got into chess, and then I got into technology, and it was a non-profit organization associated with Barnard, organized by two old black dudes, which is why I got to study at Columbia University when I was 15. And so because of that, I'm in blockchain now. And I can talk to other people, and somebody's going to see this video or talk to somebody after this conversation and inspire somebody who never thought they could be into technology. But technology is for everybody. So to me, it's up to these ICOs, the next generation ones. They need to have all of the transparency that they can that we see in these traditional companies. There's no way Starbucks should be more transparent with their money than a new ICO in this new age.
And I think and there are a lot of different white papers, and I know Vitalik has put out a few in terms of different models that you can use to make your token sale a little bit more legitimate. I think one of the easiest practices and most succinct practices that I've seen so far is keeping the amount that you raised in escrow in the token that you raised it. Right? So you can't, not cashing out to fiat. And that's when you're really at stake, in terms of, well, you can't use that to buy a bed. You have to stick with it. I do want to make a transition.
Can I add something to that?
Oh, yeah.
So I think the other fundamental transition that needs to happen is right now we're funding a lot of ideas. Right? You write a white paper, it's an idea. You haven't built anything half the time. And so what we need to be moving towards is kind of a more user-centered design. So how do we go to the field, understand the problem, and build back from that? And I haven't seen a whole lot of it. So I think that's something that needs to happen in the future if we're going to build something, especially in the social impact space, that actually has impact. It's understanding who you're building it for. One of the services that VCs provide, love them or hate them, is that they validate your business model. They will scrutinize you, they will ask you hard questions, and they will make you think about every aspect of your solution. We're not really doing that necessarily when we fund ICOs. We're throwing a lot of money based on maybe half understanding a white paper. So I think we need a lot more kind of diligence in that space and making sure that we're really building something that's valuable. The idea needs to be solid. We need to be funding the right ideas, not funding any idea.
That's a really great segue. There's a new initiative that Ripple started called Spring, and it's to support established entrepreneurs that are going to be building on top of the XRP ledger, with the XRP ledger being kind of what we see as the most efficient way to send value. So that's our new initiative, Spring, which will be funding them as well as placing them with the expertise that we think is necessary and just really building out established entrepreneurs in this space for all aspects of social change, addressing different sectors of business, and even building out what we see as a huge demand from universities looking to learn more and educate on this focus. So we do agree with you on all that aspects, and we've kind of put it out there that that's where we're putting a lot of our value towards.
Yes, and that's actually, for the rest of the conversation, I wanted to try to get us to focus on our use cases, right? And this is obviously where the blockchain comes in. I do want to, given the theme, I do want to look at use cases that are hand in hand show true utility of the cryptocurrencies that's on top of it. Because I do think there are a lot, and I also want to get into the discussion of how the user experience, right, expectations can affect that. So to start off, earlier, and I'll give you a few very vaguely mentioned use cases that Consensus is working on, because I don't want to get in trouble. So looking at things like, housing vouchers, food stamps in terms of, where are there markets where illiquidity exists and transparency could be needed, right? Because the only reason that you need a blockchain is for immutability and transparency. Blockchains make terrible databases, right? You only want the most important information on it. And you can learn that the hard way by creating a dApp on Ethereum or any of these blockchains, right? And putting everything on there and see how much ether you burn like that for some code that you probably got mistakes in. So one type of process that we use a lot is human-centered design in terms of how do we identify these markets. And housing, which is a venture that hopefully we'll work with RTI on in the future, right now in the research phases. The way that it works when you get a housing voucher is you have to make a certain level of income, and the voucher pays for the difference of your income given this equation, right? That you make, right? So say you make, $12,000 a year, to keep the math simple because I'm stupid. And that's after taxes. So you make $1,000 a month, and your rent is $1,500. You'll pay like $300, right? And then the voucher covers the rest. That's how they work. So they don't pay for everything, but they pay for what you would need, given your salary and given the district. Now, the way that it works is to say I get one in Oakland, right? But I really want to be in the center of technology, and Oakland's been great, but I want to go to San Francisco. I don't know why you want to do that, but that's the decision that you're making. Each district has different localities, right? They control their vouchers for that place. So in order for me to get a spot in San Francisco, they have to make a one-to-one exchange. Now, there is an official process which isn't one-to-one, but right now they don't really use that. It's really difficult. So housing authorities have kind of agreed, okay, we're just going to exchange this one-to-one, even though the value is not the same, right? And this is where we get into non-fungibles not having the same value. Also, what it does is when I make that exchange, right, I'm going to San Francisco, that voucher is taken from someone else who could have gotten it, right? So not only losing the transactional value of those two places not being the same amount to live in, you're also taking away social mobility opportunity from someone who could have gained it, right? In addition to that, we pay hella taxes in California. So oftentimes we don't know where our money is going to. And programs like these, just like any program, this is no hit at the government, have their level of fraud, right? And there's no transparency as to how our taxes are being used. So this is a use case in which you have, you want immutability because you want to see which transactions have gone wrong and you want to see that forever. You want transparency because you should be seeing where public funds are going into, right? That's how these programs are funded. And you want to use a crypto because you want to create some more fungible representation of something that is non-fungible, like ERC 721s or non-fungible tokens, right? You want to be able to exchange fractions of a token. So that's kind of one example to kind of set the scene. Are there, other examples? And it doesn't have to be something that's like directly crypto related, but use cases that you've seen that are actually changing the social impact sector.
Yeah, I have a great one, and this is outside of the Ripple zone and more in just a friend of mine in our kind of women in crypto group, Connie Galippi. I'm saying her last name wrong, and I apologize if she's watching, but BitGive. And so she's used the idea of blockchain and also the need for a more tax-efficient way to donate to renovate how philanthropy works. And so with BitGive, you're able to then donate your Bitcoin into a different vehicle that is more tax efficient, as well as give you transparency into where it's used. And you can focus on projects, you can allocate to different things. So that is one of the clearest social impact use cases I've seen.
Okay, so I have a podcast called Corporate to Crypto, and I'm going to be talking to one gentleman who's working with natural capital assets. So if it costs 30 cents to plant a tree, and maybe some of the natural capital that you can make off of that tree, say you're growing a plant, acorns or something, whatever, maybe you make a couple dollars over the course of a year or 2 years, how can you make money off of that? The cool thing about natural capital assets, they actually give back to the natural environment. So growing a tree is a good thing. So there's a whole economy that we're not looking at has nothing to do with technology or just hedge funds and making money, but it's actually planting things or working with animals or making farming safer. So I think there's a lot of use cases there that people should look into, and I don't want to say too much out loud, but definitely we can chat about it offline.
And
Adding on to what you just said, I gave a lot of thought actually towards the process of tokenizing your time, and I realized that when you're starting to put value not on the fiscal in terms of fiat value of things which we're used to, like buying cars, phones, services, whatever it is, but when you start measuring it by time and specifically by the time of specific people, then we're getting into a point where the value of the product is actually defined by the life of a specific person. And that's what you've been referring to when, for example, some person has an income of $1,000, but then he has to pay rent of $1,500. Where does this values that's lacking actually goes? Because there's definitely a misuse of human potential, and it has to be covered by the social initiative. Which brings us to a point where, for example, as a rich guy, I don't have any monetary needs. I have my basic life needs covered. Now I'm looking for reputation. Now I'm looking for recognition. Now I'm looking for fame. And there comes a point where I can say donate a couple of $1 million, and the name on the building will actually be proven by the transaction on blockchain. And I can safely say that, look, my tax money went to build this hospital, this road, and to help this specific person. Which creates a new subset of values where, for example, I can choose deliberately which country to help, which person to give education to, which person to, I don't know, donate to help him raise healthy crops or whatever it may be.
I would counter that and say that's actually a little bit of a dangerous idea in some senses, whereby we are prioritizing often the very flashy projects. We've seen many of these early ideas about transparency and international aid. Fundamentally, it's a good idea, right? We want accountability, but at the same time, what we're going to do with that is that it's going to prioritize, big, flashy issues. Namely, you guys remember like the Zika outbreak, right? You look at what happened with Zika, the actual risk to Americans was way less than malaria, and yet it received way more funding, and that was purely, as a function of our attention span. So unfortunately, there's kind of dark side to it where there's a lot of very deep-rooted fundamental issues that need to be addressed, and often those can only be addressed through just government funding. That's a lot of what USAID does, right? It's ugly projects. It's not sexy. They're building infrastructure. They're building sewers. It's important, and it's very difficult to quantify the value. And this is where we get into a lot of kind of the gray areas around impact assessments, right? There's a lot of indirect things that are happening, and it's very difficult to really characterize that system and understand kind of what are the one-to-one relationships. But it's great to talk about transparency, but we need to be very careful about how we do that. How do we make ourselves more accountable?
I like a combination of what you're both saying, because I think tokenizing different subsets of value that we didn't consider as tangible, right, as transactable, is critical. Not only because it shows new value and allows us to give us a little bit more control, right? We're always looking for more control over our lives, ironically. But a perfect example of that, or two examples that kind of relate to what you're saying is in a lot of emerging economies, when you're trying to get a loan, you don't use the collateral of your car title or your house title, because you don't have a car and you don't have a house. And if you do have a house, you don't have the title to it. And if you do have the title to it, you don't have your ID. So what they do is they actually take your land, or in some cases your livestock, as collateral, which is extremely hard to transact. Like, as a rural bank, and this is very true, I have to go to your farm, assess it like a few times over the fiscal year, and make sure, like, that cow is putting out that value. It's a good $100, which is very, very difficult. And this is not to separate that there still must be, evaluation assessment processes, right, to make sure or update, right, that value, right? If the cow is $100 and it dies and it's $0, right, that needs to be updated. And there certainly needs to be a process into which, it's a little bit easier to do so without fraud, and maybe that's a staking mechanism or whichever. Another that's more focused on public services and government that's been floating around is public infrastructure tokens. So obviously our taxes go toward 1,000,001 things, mostly the Army, but 1,000,001 things. And we really don't see how our investment is diversified, particularly in our state, which leads to a lot of concerns. And then we see someone like Ben Carson bought like a $15,000 beanbag or something, like in his office or something like that. I know. Yeah, I know, right? It's like he likes to take naps. But with public infrastructure tokens, you start to create transparency models, right, that use the blockchain, right, that shows the flow of money into these projects, and which you gain some social benefit from making that investment into something that's going to build a bridge or, sewage or whichever. Now, the discrepancy between the gains on that, whether that's, increased access to where others, non-investors wouldn't get it, or some type of monetary benefit in terms of dividends from taxes, is to be determined, right? Where are the legalese on that? It certainly seems like a security, but it's one that's a bit different, right? I think the closest thing akin to it would be a bond in some ways. But these are different models that guys, certainly look into. And the more white papers you read, to Ryan's point earlier on in the talk, you start to see patterns in which this is the best way to use this. And obviously the blockchain kind of being the automated accountant to this value that really couldn't have been activated any other way, other than tokenizing it.
Yeah. And beyond white papers, behind, or sometimes I like to think, hopefully, behind every white paper there's a person. Might not be true. But really, I mean, the conversations we've had right now have been way more enlightening than reading 100 papers. So hearing the conversations that you're having, keep having them. XRP chat was kind of how I got into it, because I was able to have these conversations way in the nighttime with Hong Kong with folks all over the world. So be it online or in real life, these conversations are really crucial for us figuring out how can we make the best use case? What can we tweak, or how do we view this? And I think that's only going to help the education for those making regulatory decisions, those making funding decisions, those involving key communities to really define what they want and go after it. So.
I think,
I was going to say, the other thing that we should really do is make sure to go after a diversity of opinions. Right, we typically, as a community, are very much kind of an echo chamber, right? We listen to other people that are also into Bitcoin. And so what we need to be doing is talk to people outside of us. Ask them, okay, what are your thoughts on this? How do you feel about this? If you were to be a user, what would your experience be? And make sure to kind of actively seek out people that have maybe the opposite view. It can be from any community, but I guarantee that you will get a lot of value out of having these discussions, and it's really worth your time.
I think people should look at Estonia. If you guys are familiar with Estonia, sometimes they call it E-Estonia, because it's so electronically connected with people between the government and the infrastructure that's set up. So everything outside of marriage licenses is put online. So Estonia, obviously now they're getting into blockchain. I'm seeing a lot of ICOs that are coming out of Estonia, and they're very nuanced because they already have the understanding of those patterns of how things should work best. And they have a whole country where they're actually doing test cases on what works electronically or not. So the next question is, to blockchain or not to blockchain, right? Do you need a blockchain? Maybe you don't in order to make something improve in your society. And I think with voting, obviously, a way that you can vote on the blockchain, it would be great to vote and know that nobody changed your vote or forced your vote into a different candidate. That's great. But the question is like, who runs that system? Who owns that system? Is that system decentralized? Does somebody still have access to my data? So then there's the question of, if I do vote and you can't change it, do you know who I'm voting for? Can you track that? Who has access to that system? And then you have to talk about zero knowledge proof systems, where there's different ways you can actually use a software program and none of your data is actually on the software whatsoever. So there's a messaging app concept that came out called Adamant. I did a report on them. And they actually are allowing everybody to chat for a small fee, and nobody in the company knows anything about those systems. So you look at a company like WhatsApp. WhatsApp seems like an encrypted way to talk to each other. It's not, because a developer like Robbie who works at WhatsApp can insert themselves into the chat, look at the history of the chat, scrape it, and they can check all of the identities. So before you see what's encrypted or what's on the blockchain or what's not, you have to be very careful about watching where a use case has already been done before and how we can improve upon it. So I'd point to countries like Estonia who are already making those examples for countries like the United States. We really need some of those processes.
There was a hand in the back.
On that, feeling this the whole time, hearing transparency and like all these other ideas and empowering certain vendors and things. I think the complete opposite, kind of what Andrew said, is there's beauty in anonymity. Like, there's a lot of social impact that can come from being anonymous. One of the best ways to really help with that for social impact could be the implication of how we can fight discrimination by being anonymous. There's certain cultures and certain regions where if you're a specific gender or a specific sexual orientation, you may suffer more than others. And if we use the power of anonymity and the blockchain to really advance specific people's causes, this could be one great thing. Or a charity where there could be a partner who, someone's in a domestic abuse situation where their partner has all the funds and financial control. And if they can't shield that, they can never get out because they're trapped. So there's so many different ways. I know we've talked about a little bit of transparency, but there's really almost an endless of the opposite side of that for social impact that's all anonymous.
And before getting to your comment, Andrew, I absolutely agree. And I know I don't want to get, because this is like a whole other meetup, but in terms of when you're researching these different blockchains, whichever one you have, a liking towards or feel most comfortable with, in terms of the difference between privacy and confidentiality, there are many things that you can do on a public blockchain to make things confidential or private. It just depends on how you do it, right? So, a perfect example in terms of state variables, right? You can hash your state variables and have that be a unique identifier to a database that you only have access to. Like, that would be a perfect example of confidentiality, right? And I think that attends to those use cases. I know that one of my colleagues at Consensus was working with was actually around sexual assault in the workplace, right? So for women, particularly, right? Tech is extremely sexist, right?
You don't need a man.
Yeah, no. Yeah, exactly. I would say that it's more sexist than it is racist. And because of that, right, you have, people who, have been abused in some way, but they're not necessarily in a position of control to speak out against their boss or their boss's boss that did this thing to them, right? Because they have everything to lose, and it becomes a, his word versus her word thing. So they were using, just like you would put tokens in escrow in a smart contract, they were putting reports in escrow on a smart contract in which the address wasn't recorded, and it served as a black box, right? That could be checked by only a few individuals and or hit a stop limit, right? So if there were more than 2 reports at a time, right, it would just be brought up. There's no maybe it was her opinion or maybe she felt this way. It's like, no, you have 2 different reports from 2 different people anonymously saying that you've done this, and they don't put their professional position on the line, right, to defend themselves. And obviously the same works in other aspects of discrimination as well. One thing that I did want to say for the last...
a question from a young lady over there.
Oh, yes. I apologize. Where are you? Oh, well, Andrew, actually, I owe you, and then and then afterwards...
Can I throw it over the last point?
Yeah.
Sorry, as the probably biggest pessimist in this room, again, I urge caution with all things privacy related.
Yeah.
There's good sides and bad sides to it, and you really need to think a lot about the use case. We think about cyberbullying, right? That was hugely enabled by privacy. You think about, I did some work on counterterrorism, right? That's part of the ISIS ideology. It's like when you do an execution, being there with a mask on, that allows you to do certain behaviors that you otherwise wouldn't do. So there's a lot to think about, a lot to unpack when it comes to human psychology.
And after, it's so depressing now. After Andrew's comment, I do want the last 10 to 15 minutes that we have, guys, ask questions. I apologize us not being able to cover everything. Certainly, join the BISIC community. Some members, I'm hoping Ripple becomes a member after this. But we want to collaborate, and we really want to give you all the materials to build. Because I would say one thing as a developer, that developing dApps is pretty simple. Not gonna lie, documentation's not the best, but you can get something out there. It's that user process and experience that needs to be worked on. It's that model for that particular niche process that needs to be reinvented. That's what needs to be worked on. Because right now it's really, really terrible, and that's why you don't see any mainstream adoption of most dApps that don't have anything directly to do with the cryptocurrency that's being traded or transacted. Andrew.
A quick shout out in terms of voting. Have you looked at Nimit Swami's Votes project? It's voting on the blockchain. It's a 2-part key thing. Highly recommend it if you're interested in voting on the blockchain. My bigger issue is the privacy thing. That if you look at it, it's critically important. That one of the biggest groups looking at blockchain right now is China. And if you look at what they're doing in the Uyghur regions, in terms of a total surveillance state, they're very interested in, hey, look, similar to India's Aadhaar card, If I give you an identity card and that logs every activity and it's logging it on chain, I own you now.
Yeah.
Like, you can't think without me knowing. And you start coupling that with AI and you've got some real interesting problems. So
You
it's
get
not
China,
all-
basically.
I want to pose a question to the panel. I often argue with my friends about this topic, and I know that there's no binary answer. Nothing's binary, really. But I want to know your guys' opinions on when, as a developer's standpoint, I care so much about the social impact, social manipulation, that, my product, has the potential of, causing. And I wonder, do you guys, how much emphasis on, the product do you care over, social impact? And is this something that should be cared about more than profit? Or, how do you guys like to handle that, topic in general? I'm curious to your opinion.
I know for us, we often do our projects at a deficit. I was looking at the numbers yesterday. I was like, hold on, it came to 2. This trip costs more than the project. No. I mean, it's certainly, for us, we're not a revenue-seeking entity, a part of Consensus, and we have the luck to be that, right? I would say, in terms of like the product experience, I would say 2/3 of our process is research and interviewing, right? And creating and that's to create a proof of concept. And that last few parts is development, because you really don't want to invest that time, developing, designing something that people just don't use. It's the same lean startup methodology that I'm sure, as Californians, we're all pretty inundated with. You have to carry in at an even greater extent with social impact, and make sure, if you're trying to make a cashless, economy in a dump site in the Philippines, and they literally call them dump sites because they are part of a dump site. There's no differentiation between the village and the trash. You're gonna have to live there for a few days, right? To understand, okay, what's their access like? What are the hierarchy of needs, right? Is this even something that we should entertain? Or is it something that we could use the blockchain to disseminate funds across organizations that are helping these regions?
Do you read Robert Reich ever? He just released a great book called Common Good. I highly recommend it. He's out of Berkeley. And part of it touches on the idea of a lot of corporations now are geared towards maximizing shareholder value. Right? They're extracting as much wealth as they humanly can out of the operations. And on the other side, what we see in the international development space is a shift more towards more sustainable initiatives. So let's say you want to, this is what I did for a long time, is I commercialize technologies funded by the Gates Foundation. So how can we make these stand on their own 2 feet? Because that's often what makes things more sustainable and more effective, is if they can float themselves. So I would say the answer to that question is you've got to balance both. Right? There's got to be kind of a happy medium, and so don't forget the bottom line. But often, by empowering by prioritizing to a certain extent those profits, you end up doing more good. So I'd say both.
Yeah, I would point it to recruitment efforts and really making sure the people behind the product are what you want your culture for your company, for your project to really bring. And I know that our product managers come from all different backgrounds, and their aspects are, still aligned to the idea of delivering this internet of value or moving money like we can move data. And that doesn't really have a huge monetary benefit other than empowering the rest of the world. I mean, if the person that was designing kind of IP was like, oh yeah, this is going to make me rich, it's not necessarily that. It's like, I'm going to be able to become the bottom layer. That we can then build whatever we want on top of it. So it comes down to the people, honestly, and they're good eggs, they're bad eggs. Try and grab the great ones.
I would say try to talk to people who work at different companies. When you're looking at different ICOs, all these ICOs have telegrams. So go on the Telegram channel and try to talk to somebody from the team. If you don't get the answers you want, don't mess with it. I feel like if you come into terms with a white paper or a company, you don't know what they're talking about, you don't really know what they're trying to do, but your friend told you it was legit, don't invest in it. If you don't understand what they're doing and they're not making it clear, then don't participate. But if you think that they need help, then you should be a part of the community. and you should talk about getting into that community. I think crypto benefits from having such great people because they're inherently very collaborative instead of competitive, right? So there's not a lot of places where you can't actually help as a developer or just as an ideator. So when you're looking at all these different companies out there, there's a company that does everything. If you don't see them actually making an impact, if you don't see somebody in the team actually helping them, if you don't see the end result or the actual proof, don't believe it. Nothing is stronger than actual proof with a company. And at the end of the day, every single company is a company. They have to fund themselves to exist. The truth of the matter is, like, profit, bottom line, it always matters. The point of blockchain to me is so that all of these companies at the end of the day will be able to see what impact they really, really made for other people. That will all be on the blockchain. If you want to live in a community where everything's on the blockchain and everything is immutable and everything's transparent, and you have this utopian idea of it, then build it. Like, get into crypto tomorrow. Like, just decide that you're going to help and disrupt the industry.
Along those lines, do you guys have any like actual recommendations of how like we could influence social impact on?
He said, any suggestions on how to engage in social impact more broadly?
I mean, a huge amount of at least everything is open source technology. So dream it, build it, and then ask us for money. And come with a proven vision with a good team. And you know, we're really open to quite a variety of ideas using open source technology that is there for anyone to build.
I certainly would second that. One thing, and we didn't get enough time to get into it today, but you're starting to see different organizational types, social enterprises, which really didn't exist before. You had Tom's, right, where you buy some shoes and they give some shoes, but that wasn't like central to their business model as much as it was to their marketing.
Yeah.
And you're starting to see organizations that have found business models directly attending to social impact issues. And that has given a raise to a lot of different foundations. And Ripple has the same, right? MakerDAO has the same in the stable fund. So does Bancor with the Bancor Foundation. So guys, if you all have like found a way or a model or an idea that has some type of social impact that can leverage one of these existing open source technologies, there is a lot of money to fund what you're doing, right? If you're really, really dedicated. The other thing that I would say, second thing I would say, for social impact specifically, if you're a developer, our GitHub repo is public for everything. I'm going to put some token models that we discussed today on it, and you can do what you want with it. Just give me a little CC at the bottom, And the last thing is, and we made this mistake as a team, and are now correcting it, is stay away from the prestige of international social impact. And the reason I say that isn't because other countries don't need aid. They certainly do. The whole world does. But like, guys, like look at Fruitvale Station. Like look at Civic Center. Like these are areas where we see every day when we came here, right? It's bad in San Francisco. And I'm from Atlanta. And when I came over here, I was like, this is dirtier than New York. Like for real. And there's no reason, as much capital as there is here, like one of the capital centers of the world, for that ever to be the case. And I think that's where you're going to see the most change, right, is attending to these audiences that live around yourself, that one, you culturally can identify better with than you could with a Filipino, right?
I invite you to also look into the Philippines.
Yeah. Yes. Not the Philippines, isn't
But if you are looking for resources, that's what RTI does. We work with a bunch of different organizations in the Bay Area. We do have a lot of connections. We understand a lot of these communities. A big need for us right now, for example, is if anybody has any ideas around the opioid epidemic. We have a huge problem. And we are looking to leverage blockchain technology. So if you have an idea, come find me.
And I know you had a comment.
I was just going to read an interesting thing. That while I totally agree with you, there's a lot of problems here. The vagabond lifestyle is also a huge thing in California, that there's plenty of people that have had opportunities in life that rejected them to live that lifestyle. And I think you walk around the streets of San Francisco and you see a lot of drug abuse things like that. And if you compare that to a place like the Philippines, you have people that are doing everything that they can for themselves. They aren't abusing any sort of system around them. I think we have plenty of opportunity here. So I think it's necessary to keep an open mind that like a lot of people are doing everything that they possibly can to reach a base level of staying alive. And I wouldn't discourage investing into those and prioritizing those over, yeah, we have a huge problem here, but I think the accessibility to fixing those outside of the mental illness issue, which is huge, but also a whole other nutshell that is nearly impossible to tackle. I just don't necessarily I'm not fully on board with that.
Yeah, no. Just a quick comment. So I agree with that somewhat in that.
You can go local. I'll go global.
No.
We know people we want to be.
I mean, everybody needs help.
Just get out there.
I'm not trying to discourage that.
No, not at all. And again, I think both types of aid are incredibly significant. I do think, though, when you're in that research sprint part of your project, right? Like if you're going to go, create impact in the Philippines, you need to be physically in the Philippines.
And I was.
Yeah,
So.
Exactly.
And we're building out liquidity in the Philippines to allow for a deemed market that will allow remittances back and forth because that's one of the highest remitted areas. What that's going to allow is for folks that have hard-earned dollars not to pay $35 for a wire transfer back into the Philippines. So for me, that's a huge impact, and it came from living in Southeast Asia for a significant amount of time and really having the passion to help those folks. So.
And from that experience, she probably already knows, right, that the stratification differences, like in the Philippines versus here, it's ridiculous there, right? You have the difference, and this isn't just, because obviously you have billionaires, right, in the United States, but here,
in the Philippines.
you have billionaires in the Philippines, and like shanty towns. Right, things that you would very rarely see in the United States that happen there, and you also have a different interaction of cultures, right? So here, most people who are quote unquote privileged, usually white individuals, there is Chinese, right? And there's a whole cultural dissonance between Chinese, Filipinos.
I also just avoid generalizations and
Yeah.
get on the ground and do something that helps at least one person. Because that's a huge problem that we have as well, is making a generalized sweep of affecting a certain area or bringing blockchain to Africa, things that impact everything.
Jesus Christ.
We really just need to be narrow in our focus and kind of really do that right.
And I would say to your question about how can you get involved, forget the blockchain. Just do the social impact. If you go to 7-Eleven every day and you see the person working behind the counter and you treat them like a robot, and you like, well, they always have a bad attitude, and why should I smile at them? Why should I engage in conversation with them? This is somebody who lives in your community. This is somebody who's a part of your ecosystem and pays taxes with you. And this is somebody that you ignore. How are you going to make an impact on a global scale if in your local community you don't lift a finger? So the question is when are you going to engage in that conversation and realize this person's always pissed off because the point of sale system doesn't work that well. And so when they're checking you out, it takes them longer than they want, and they feel like they're inconveniencing you, and they feel bad for you, and that's why they look at you the same way. And then you can say, well, I actually know a cryptocurrency company that can work. I know Consensus has a program, or Ripple has a program, where they can help 7-Eleven do this in a local way. Maybe you make a connection or build an app using their GitHub to actually make the company millions of dollars and improve your relationship with this individual in the community at the same time. So forget the blockchain. The social impact comes first. Because to blockchain or not to blockchain is still the question that we still need use cases for.
Any other?
If you want to continue this conversation, would you mind sharing your contact information?
Yeah. Do we want to write our Twitter apps?
Yeah.
Yeah. On the board.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Amy. You can put your email on there. We'll certainly, let's do that now if we can.
Your congressman's
Let's,
address. From North Carolina, or okay.
So this is mine. What's yours?
Ryan Dennis Live.
Cool. 2 ends.
2 ends. Best way.
Live. Woo, boy.
It's worth everything.
That is a sentence. It does sound good though, the live part. Well, Adrian, we don't skip you putting your email out. What's your...
You know him, Aber.
Aber, oh yeah. Hey man. At RTI. That worked.
There's no at the beginning, by the way.
Oh.
Crypto Coley.
Ooh. Can I copy that? That's at COO?
COLEY.
Okay, there you go. There you go, folks. DM, email, certainly we'll hit you back.
I have cards too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Regarding to what you said, actually, in a way, about access to social impact opportunities, because what I see in the world in general, sorry for generalizing things, a lot of times the institutions that are actually created to either solve the problems or combat them in a way are worsening the problem itself, because they're in the position of giving fish to the hungry instead of finding a way to give them a fishing pole so that the problem itself disappears. So my question is, how do you actually interact with those structures whose sole purpose is to exist and to constantly combat this problem? Do you educate them? Do you find a workaround and connect to a different higher standing institution? What do you do?
I think, so just like a lot of us have this kind of revolutionary in us, right? Particularly in peer-to-peer, blockchain community, and our focus tends to be banks. I would say that we should have that same disintermediary focus on nonprofits as well. Perfect example is what happened in Haiti, right, with Red Cross, right? You had almost $4 billion or something like that, and they built like 9 houses. And actually, there are sites online that tell you the cents on the dollar from each of these nonprofits that you donate to, how much goes to operational costs and how much actually, improves impact. So to your point in terms of giving people the ability to function and have that for a lifetime versus kind of standalone instances of charity is certainly a thing that needs to be effective. It's difficult, one, because nonprofits have the same monopoly that other commercial entities have in other sectors. The stance that Consensus Social Impact has taken on it is changing funding incentives, so innovative funding. So an easy example, I don't know if you've heard of Bounties Network. But Bounties Network just creates bounties, right? A bounty is, I want you to write this piece of code for me, you write it, I give you an ETH. That needs to be a whole app if I give you ETH. Making codependent donations that are bounty-like to nonprofits working in the same locality, right? What that would look like, right? So Red Cross needs to provide, 100 water filter trainings and, some other, organization that helps with prenatal care needs to, create a referral program in which others know how to get people to that place, right? And those have to happen together, right, for anyone to get money. I think are good ways to coalesce, ways in which people are actually learning and they're not just receiving. And some nonprofits are good about it. Others, this is a different focus.
Yeah, I'd say do your homework. It tends to be the case where it's often sensationalized, the degree to which it happens. There's always, the Red Cross example is kind of the exception to the rule. I've done a lot of program reviews. We typically don't find that sort of thing. But this is a case where really you should be voting with your dollars and your energy. Right? If you find a cause that is doing capacity building, right, that's a lot more valuable long term. But it doesn't negate the fact that we maybe need to feed those people at the same time in order for them to survive through that training. So there's a lot that needs to be done kind of from our side to really research and understand what is that organization doing. Is that something that's productive? Right? There are a lot of organizations that register as 501c that are maybe not doing things that are very productive. You look at a lot of these kind of more religious-oriented charities. I apologize. Unfortunately, we find that tends to be less effective. So, do your homework, figure out who's actually doing something that you believe in, and that's who you should be supporting.
One more question.
I don't think that Twitter handle person's right.
Rob, the G before the 4. You're right. It's Rob TG4. TG4. Could you put, Ryan, could you put a G right there? A little small G.
I will turn you into a G.
Yeah.
Thanks for checking.
Well played.
So guys, that is it. Thank you so much for staying. I appreciate it. Of course, thank you to our amazing panelists. Feel free to reach out, guys. I'm serious. If you DM me, I will DM you back. I'm sure the same is